Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 328 or 328. My name is John Logan, and I moved last week. Amanda and I, we moved into a new apartment, which is technically a new apartment. We're in the same building. We're in the same unit. We're just 23 stories higher. There were some problems with our old unit, so I convinced the building management to allow us to move upstairs, which, great. We love the unit. We love the layout, but we needed to get out of there. It did create a weird situation, though, where the day we moved, we were moving out of our apartment into an empty apartment. And then as the day went on, we started moving out of our apartment into our apartment because various pieces of furniture would be going up. So it was like a real ship of Theseus kind of situation where it slowly got transported up 23 stories. But it was a pretty smooth move. It was actually probably the smoothest move I've ever had in my entire life. And the reason I'm saying this is I might sound a little bit different because I am technically in a different office. Same basic size of room, but there's a few more angles and walls in places. If I sound a little bit more bouncy, I need to get sound panels up. So let's introduce today's panel. So first up, we have Audra.
Hello.
And Ben.
Hey.
Out of curiosity, as a little bit of a pre-show, what was the worst or best move you've ever had? You can choose which one.
Oh, God. Well, actually, the worst one wasn't even really my move, but it was a move that I participated in, which is when my mom, I helped my mom move to Arizona from Atlanta, Georgia, and we drove in a van with 2 cats, a dog, and all of her houseplants.
Holy crap.
All the way from Atlanta to Phoenix, Arizona. And that was multiple days driving through the desert in this hot van. It was horrible. And it was the middle of summer too. So it was so hot there.
Middle of summer in Arizona too.
Yes, it was. When we got to Phoenix, it was 120 degrees outside.
I'm Canadian, so I don't even know how hot that is. All I know it's very, very hot.
Oh, very hot. I don't know what it would be in Celsius, but
I should be able to convert it in my head, but I can't.
Very hot. Very hot.
Very hot. Wow, that sounds like a terrible move, but at least it happened. Audra, how about you? Best or worst move?
Probably my worst move was actually in college. There was one time when we couldn't get too many people to help us move. So it was actually just a shared car ride with just cramped. And yeah, it was very fun.
I think the fact that most people, when you say, tell us your best or worst move, they instantly go to their worst move just says how bad moving really is. Anyway, let's move on now to our first game we're talking about today. And we're going in a slightly different direction than usual. We're going on to our phones, a mobile game. We're talking about Persona 5, The Phantom X. So as you can clearly tell from the title, this is a spin-off of Persona 5. If you're listening to this, you know what Persona 5 is, but I'll give you a little preamble anyway. It's a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei. It found its first, the first 2 entries were a little different than the rest of the series. It really kind of locked in about Persona 3 in 2006. And then 4 came out, and then 5 came out and became a global success. Huge. It was so successful, in fact, that they released a new version 4 years later in 2020 called Persona 5 Royal, which is considered to be the definitive version of the game. And then this was so popular that they were like, hey, let's do some spin-offs. So they released Persona 5 Strikers, which is basically a direct story sequel to the original Persona 5, but uses real-time action combat, very similar to the Dynasty Wars series. There was Dancing in Starlight, which was a rhythm game. There was Persona 5 Tactica, which is a grid-based strategy RPG.
I reviewed that one.
You did review that one. Remind me if it was good or not. I think it was.
It was good, but not as good as it could have been.
Well, that actually nicely brings us to the latest spin-off, Persona 5, The Phantom X. Audra, you reviewed this. What is your background with the Persona series?
Well, I've played Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, and I rather liked it despite the fact that the gameplay was a little dated. I played P3P on the PlayStation Portable, which is the PlayStation Portable version of Persona 3.
Oh yeah, there are 5 different versions of Persona 3.
I played Persona 4, and I've played Persona 5, but only the original version. And I kind of had to give up on the final dungeon because it just went on too long.
I really want to play Persona 5, but I really want to be in the right headspace for it.
Yeah, I think you have to have the patience for it, and I haven't quite had it yet to go back.
Yeah, at some point I'm going to get a real hankering to play a Yakuza game, and I'll be like, next best thing. This game looks very similar to Persona 5. Actually, the one that looks the most similar to Persona 5 since Strikers. It is the same art style, which is the striking kind of angular box art style. And is this game a direct sequel to Persona 5, or is it like a side story?
It's more of like a side story, although it's kind of like an alternate universe retelling, actually. Maybe be the better way to describe it. It has a whole new cast of characters. And they kind of exist with the P5 Phantom Thieves, like have their own like universe that's occasionally they mix and merge. So it's actually, I found it to be an interesting one because I was like, oh, it's not rehashing the same plot.
This sounds ridiculous. This has no relevance to either of you, but one of my favorite shows when I was a kid was a television show called Erie, Indiana. And the first 2 seasons, it was like Twin Peaks for kids. And the first 2 seasons were set in Erie, Indiana. And then they revived the series, but the 2 kid leads were getting too old. So they basically moved to a parallel universe where these kids never existed, but other kids existed in this other Erie, Indiana. And that sounds a little bit like this.
Yeah, actually, that's pretty accurate.
Okay, who is the main character and why is he doing all this?
Our main character is a teenage boy because of its persona.
Of course
so,
it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And his name is Nagisa Camisero, I believe is the actual default name. But he goes by the Phantom Thief codename Wonder when he becomes a Persona user. Because they all have to have like Phantom Thief code names for some reason, just to keep up the mystery.
Absolutely. I mean, why would you want to do this if you didn't get a cool code name?
Cool nickname, yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, the storyline is humanity's desires and like the will to live, basically, is getting stolen by some, they're not quite sure yet.
How topical.
Yeah. And so he witnesses at first, like he actually witnesses a girl jump off a building.
Oh.
And yeah, it can get pretty dark at times. And he gets approached by this talking owl named Lufel, who naturally is interested in him because he comes across the other side, like he had his hope stolen, but he somehow managed to kind of claw back through and become the Persona user. And so he decides to form this group of Phantom Thieves that are going around trying to restore hope to people.
Owls, of course, being the cats of the bird world.
And naturally, it's kind of funny. They do have, whenever Morgana and Lufel meet up, they do not like each other. So it's kind of like the birds and cats.
That is appropriate. Let's just cut to the chase here. This is a gacha game. It is. And as such, but a lot of gacha games are literally just cash grabs. I don't know. Just they try to extract the maximum amount of money for literally the minimal amount of work that the developers put into it. That is not this game. This game looks like a full-scale Persona game, just with gacha mechanics.
It actually is. I was impressed with it. They could have just made it actually a new Persona title. And I think it would work really well as one, but they decided, I guess, to make it a gacha. A gacha.
Okay, how does the gacha specifically work in this title?
Basically, you constantly hit the wall whenever you're trying to like level up characters, and so you have to like go through these different events to get the items needed to actually level up people properly, unless you decide to put money down, of course.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yes.
So basically, like a lot of gacha games, they're putting up artificial barriers in the way of things that you almost take for granted in a full not free to play RPG.
And I mean, you get more characters to join your party if you do the gacha pulls.
Oh, of course, because that's where the money is.
Mm-hmm. And most of those are like the Persona 5 original characters, or like 5-star pulls. And then and it's a shame because some of the characters are actually really interesting. So I want them to be in it more. Like, they even have a 75-year-old woman
in a JRPG.
Yeah, and she's a Persona user.
Are you sure she's not 27?
I don't believe so. They do have a woman in her 40s too, actually.
Good God, this is the most progressive JRPG I've heard for quite some time. We have people over the age of 30. And it's a Persona game. Okay. See, here's my problem with the idea of a gacha mechanic in a game like this. This is a story-based RPG, and gacha mechanics are intentionally put into place to interrupt that and to prevent you from moving forward, which I imagine just kills the pacing of the game.
It does. I had to restart, actually, for reasons, but I'm currently on the halfway point of the first chapter again, which was a little annoying because I was actually close to the end of the first chapter the first time I was playing it. And it's just every couple of days you advance a little bit and then you have to stop and wait for everything to, like, your free refills to refill. And so it just feels like it's very slow going.
I read your review and I know Persona, so I imagine that another way that they can put gacha mechanics in the way might be in the character relationships.
Yes, you do have to, in order to create the synergy bonds with characters.
Synergy bonds, that is social links, but that is a safe way of putting it.
It's a nice way of saying social links. You have to usually wait a day or two in between doing like one event with someone, and then you have to wait like until the next time you're playing to start advance it again.
I mean, I guess it's clever, but at the same time, it's like, that's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the actual mechanics of the game, let's talk about the combat system, because one of the best things about the Persona games, and certainly Persona 5, is the incredibly stylish combat. That is translated here, right?
Yes, it's pretty faithfully translated, I'd say. It's you pretty much just, your goal is to kind of plow through battles using like elemental affinities, which is why they kind of have so many Persona users to begin with, is because they're like, everybody has their own elemental specialty, and if you have like a well-rounded party, you could maybe wipe the floor at the dungeon, but then if you don't have that part, the specific elements that would be great for that part, for that dungeon, then you have to like really kind of wait until you pull someone, which is a little annoying. Yeah. Again,
pacing. Mm-hmm. So it even gets in the way in the fights. Again, it sounds like they are expertly laying the gacha traps in here.
Yeah, but it actually, the turn-based combat is pretty fast and fun. You can actually speed it up if you want to. You can, if you hit the elemental weaknesses for all the enemies, you can do like the all-out attacks, which is like when everybody gains up on people.
You mentioned in the review that your main character is really the only one who gains levels, and the rest of them, like you said, you have to give them, is it items?
Yeah, there's like special items that are for experience gaining, for level gaining. They had it in like other games like Genshin Impact too, where you had to give items to characters to level them up. And Wonder is the only one that gets, like, through the story or through special events, he gets his own experience bar.
Yeah, that sounds really, really, I guess, tricky.
He also, depending on how many, like, persona you end up registering with in the Velvet Room, he gets what they call schema points, which are, like, his own special, he has, like, a talent pool skill tree, and you can put like more points towards that and raise his stats that way too. And he's the only character that you can do that with.
Just out of curiosity, so you do need to, use these items to strengthen your party if you want to progress in the game. I imagine the process to acquire more is you either wait or you buy.
Wait or you buy, yeah. every day you get like special, it's called like, I think it's coffee, which you can invest into this realm of reminiscence or realm of regression. I can't remember what it's called. It's some sort of special like a battle arena that you can fight in, and then you can earn more items to level up characters and stuff that way. But you only have a finite number of coffee every day.
Well, you shouldn't drink that much coffee in one day. It'll keep you up. It'll keep you up, and then you'll never ever, you'll never ever get rest points to eventually reset the timer. One of the things about Persona that has always interested me, perhaps because I'm such a huge Yakuza Like a Dragon fan, are the number of activities that you can do outside of combat or outside of these missions. In this game, is that still there? And if it is that also gated?
It's gated in the sense that you have only so many activity points daily, and then the second you log out the next day, you come in and they refresh some of them. So at the moment, currently I have about 20 because I haven't used any because I've been dungeon exploring for a while. But basically certain activities will cost you more activity points. Like if you wanted to spend time with raise a character's bond level, or like you can do like jobs and even like take a soak in the bathtub if you wanted to, or play a virtual game. Yeah,
okay, so the kind of things that you do in a Persona game.
Yeah, and you usually have like you have levels of statuses, social statuses that you have to sometimes have like higher statuses like the proficiency or kindness in order to even open up some of the later activities.
One of the things that really strikes me about the game, looking at screenshots and looking at some footage online, is that, I said this earlier, just how much it looks like a Persona game, because it is. But the presentation here is key, because the presentation is really what sets Persona apart. In terms of the visual aesthetic of the game, can you describe just how, I guess while you were playing it, did the visual presentation of the game give you that feeling of connection to the other games in the series?
Yes, very much so. The Persona 5.
Yeah, the fonts in this game are nuts.
Yeah. It's pretty much quite toe-to-toe with Persona 5 in terms of just visually. And, the soundtrack, they have Lynn singing songs in it, and it's very much, it screams Persona 5 with, like, the visuals and soundscape.
Yeah, and also it has really good voice acting and an exceptionally good quality English script.
Yes, it's expertly translated, which is something I often take for granted when it comes to mobile games, because sometimes I've played some that are very much poorly AI translated.
We won't see much more of that in the future, I'm sure. That's surely an outlier. Oh god, ChatGPT 5 got released today. We'll see how that works. To be completely honest, I think it's probably going to be spectacular in terms of its performance as compared to its previous versions or even its competitors. I'm not celebrating that, but I think that in the future, AI translations are going to become more common, and thankfully will become slightly better. But obviously, you just can't match like a human writing the stupid dialogue and translating it and localizing it to here. Mm-hmm. But this game doesn't do that, so we should probably, not complain about something that is not impacted by this game at all.
Pretty excellent, actually.
Yeah. You mentioned that there were some issues with the controls while you were playing it on PC. I guess that's because it's mobile. It's essentially mobile first.
It's mobile first, so I think it's very much you can play controller with your game controller if you're on the PC, but there are certain buttons that, like on the top of the screen and stuff, that I found I could not hit with the controller pad at all. So I had switched to mouse. I was switching to mouse constantly for that. And one of the fighting moves, they have a special highlight move, which is like a super combo that the characters can do. And I found that I had to actually click with the mouse on the character in the battle screen and then activate it that way. Like, I could not get the controller to actually do it.
That's a real shame because, like we were talking about, one of the major strengths of the Persona series is the UI. So the fact that the UI is not working with the controller is probably a little frustrating.
Yeah, I think it probably works better if you have like a stylus or something.
Or even a finger.
Mm-hmm, or even a finger, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. I just kind of wish that they put a little bit of extra effort to make it a little bit more, I know it's a PC, but console friendly with a controller.
I mean, I especially like playing it on the PC and stuff, so.
Yeah, feels like a real game.
Yes.
Speaking of feeling like a real game, you actually really enjoyed this game. From the review that I read and from talking to you here, I feel like this is an extremely frustrating game for you because you can really see not just the bones, but like you can see the complete experience being excellent. But the gacha mechanics, the gacha wall is just blocking you every single step of the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really I liked it so much I'm playing it again but yeah, it's unfortunate that you have to like just take little steps with it all the time.
I'm curious, I'm putting you on the spot here, and this does not need to be your definitive answer, but in a hypothetical world where this was simply just a mobile Persona 5 game and there were no gacha mechanics in it, but otherwise it was identical, what do you think you would have given it?
Probably 85, 86 maybe?
Yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems about the amount that unnecessary barriers are putting up. I say unnecessary, but that's how they make their money. It's so frustrating to me that, like, I don't actually have a problem with gacha games, primarily because I don't play them. But most gacha games just out there, it's shovelware. It's the equivalent of the various games you would have found in a basket in front of the electronics section in Walmart, like during the PlayStation era. Like, it's shovelware. But every now and then something sneaks through like this that obviously took talented developers years to make, and like the care and effort that they put into it to create a compelling game. And then there's this layer on top of it to just, unless you're paying insane amounts of money, to ruin the experience. It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
I also don't know how much money it will make them. I mean, the reason why gacha games, a lot of them work, is because they're shovelware. You can just shovel as many out there as you possibly can, and it brings in the cash. But here, I imagine that it has to be pretty successful for them to actually recoup their costs. There have been some very high-profile mobile games in the last few years in the JRPG sphere that have shut down, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, Jono, because like really, I think that what you're saying of like them being kind of like something you can just like crap out really quickly, I think used to be true of gacha games when it was more like they were more like games that really relied heavily on like 2D art and just like pulling for characters and very simple gameplay. But I mean, now like the biggest gachas are things like the like Hoyoverse games, you know, like Genshin or
Impact.
Zenless Zone Zero or Star Rail. And those games, I mean, they have an incredible amount of production value put into them because, you know, the return on that investment is so high. You know, if they release a really popular character, they're making like hundreds of millions of dollars in a single day when character drops. And so I think that this game is probably kind of going for that, like that level of investment to try and get like that level of return. But I don't know if there really is that much of a built-in audience for that for Persona, like a Persona 5 spinoff, really, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of thing is trend chasing, where you have to keep upping the ante to make more and more impressive games. But like, how can I put this? As far as I can tell, I've never played it before, although I've heard some good things. Genshin Impact is very much kind of a little bit more like it's not an MMORPG, but it is a open world with continuing changes and new content and things like that. So in my mind, the gacha mechanics almost work as a subscription model. I might be wrong about that, but that's kind of how I interpret it. Whereas this game, it just seems like here's a single player game that's complete. Now we're going to put up barriers in the way of you actually beating it.
Yeah, it's a lot more like that's kind of what the structure of Honkai Star Rail is, which is also made by the same developer, but is also a turn-based like RPG. So, and I found that playing that game that you really, and Audra, I don't know if you felt this way about this Persona 5X, but even more than like the pulling for characters and that costing a lot of money, the thing that I found that kind of I've liked the Hoyoverse games, but I had to drop off of them. And the main reason was because they want you to play like every day and you have to do like what's essentially like chores. Like
they give you
day.
Bonuses if you log in every day and do. Yeah, they do that in this game too.
Yeah, and that's really the part that wears on you over time. It's not even that like the characters and you have to pull for characters and it costs a lot of money. It's that you have to the game really wants you to play it every single day, like 30 minutes a day, and that just gets to be a huge grind after a while.
Yeah,
the nonstop monetization of pushing it on top of you. You have to be logged in, and then when you're logged in, they get more opportunities to try to get you to buy stuff.
Yeah,
not my favorite model for monetization in video games, to be honest.
No, it could be better. It's a shame because this one actually I do feel like it has the strength to actually be a solid, like, just Persona spinoff on its own, if it was a single player.
Well, we might actually be talking about something a little bit later that might tie into that, but I want to move on now to another game that has an X in it. This is a very X episode. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. X marks the spot, something like that, maybe. Good. Yeah. And the game we're talking about is Xenoblade Chronicles X. I guess there's technically two X's in that. Definitive edition.
Yes.
So, Ben, you reviewed this not a little while ago, you reviewed it last week. I'm just going to give a little bit of history about the series and the game, and then we'll talk about it. So, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, developed by Monolith Soft. They are a Nintendo-owned studio. They have a lengthy history of making large RPGs, JRPGs specifically, and the Xenoblade series is a spiritual successor to various other Xeno titles, and it's a weird kind of metaverse thing that's going on where none of them are really connected to each other, and many of them aren't even owned by the same people, but they're just like still kind of connected through complex philosophical themes, things like that. Xenoblade Chronicles, the original Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii, actually has a fascinating story attached to it. Some out there might recognize the campaign Operation Rainfall. Back when the Wii was riding high, Nintendo kind of refused to localize 3 massive RPGs, one of which was Xenoblade Chronicles. The others were The Last Story and Pandora's Tower. So a lot of this, I think a lot of the love of this series comes about from a very personal connection that came about with fans back then really fighting for it. And it worked. It got released. And it did, I think it did okay. It didn't like set the world on fire, but it did get a sequel 5 years later, Xenoblade Chronicles X. It was very different, and it released for the Wii U, which I don't really need to tell you the rest of that story. I just need to say the Wii U. Then in 2017, it came, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 came out for the Switch, which I don't really need to go too deeply into that either because it was on the Switch. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 came out in 2022. So this is a very long-running series at this point, beloved by its fan base. It uses a real-time auto-attack system, and it's notable for having different protagonists and a core cast in every entry. So it goes the Final Fantasy route of each game almost being a spiritual sequel rather than a direct story narrative sequel. So, Ben, I gotta ask, you gave the game 100. Why?
Yeah.
This is not criticism. I'm not saying like why. I'm saying why.
Well, I was a huge fan of the original on the Wii U. I think that I'm a big fan of Tetsuya Takahashi, who is the kind of creative lead behind the entire Xeno series over at Monolith Soft, and I think all his games are great. And to me, Xenoblade Chronicles X was already the best game that he'd ever made. But when Xenoblade Chronicles X came out on the Wii U, They were trying a lot of like experimental things with that game, asynchronous multiplayer and open world games, especially like open world RPGs, weren't as like dominant back then, and especially not for Nintendo. They really were not releasing any games like that on their systems, and so it was kind of doing a lot of new things at the time and wasn't necessarily doing all of them perfectly. But this definitive edition really goes back and fixes a lot of the flaws that the original had and adds some new things that really elevate what was already like a pretty excellent game into one of the best games ever made, I think. I think it deserves that rating because it's a game that is really showing like Monolith Soft at the height of their like creative prowess.
It's fascinating to me that you say that because generally speaking, Xenoblade Chronicles X is considered to be the black sheep of the family. Now, clearly that has nothing to do with the actual quality of the game. It probably has to do with the console it got released on. So not that many people, well, a lot of people, but not as many people would have played it as the original or the sequel.
Yes.
So
yes,
I think it's interesting that this might be it's not even the diamond in the rough. It's an overlooked classic, and I'm really, really excited by the idea that they knew this and were like, okay, no, we've got to fix this. We need to get it out here. This released a few months ago. So if anyone wants to play it, they certainly can. And Ben, you told us a little bit about your experience with Xenoblade Chronicles X. What is your overall experience with the Xeno, meta series? Yeah, so
I played, Xenogears, the Xenosaga trilogy, and then all the Xenoblade Chronicles games.
So you're well versed.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting, this definitive edition, adds an epilogue to the end of the game. So one of the major kind of issues or, sticking points of the original release is that it had kind of what you would call a cliffhanger ending and then never received a direct sequel. So that's always been something that fans have been kind of bothered by. And the epilogue, while it doesn't, it can't do what like a true sequel would do. It does kind of answer some of the unanswered questions and then also connects the game more directly, like thematically, to the other games in the Xeno, series. So you have a little bit more of that metaphysical kind of connection to the other games that the original kind of lacked. And like you were saying, it was, kind of a black sheep. And that is partly because it was on the Wii U and not a lot of people played it. But it's also because the game is much harder sci-fi than the other games. And it wasn't, hitting on some of those narrative themes that as much as the other games in the Xeno catalog have. But the epilogue does actually do a lot of that. And so I think a lot of people who are fans of the other Xeno games, but haven't played X or played X, but kind of missed that part of it, would enjoy the definitive edition because it kind of does that stuff too. So
the science fiction angle on this, because I'm looking at the screenshots and it looks very different from some of the other games in the series, many of which are very like the original. When I picture for Xenoblade, I picture greenery, like basically nature, whereas this looks like
it's more of like a science fantasy, right? Like it's like more of like a fantasy setting, but with some like scientific or futuristic elements, right? And this game is not that, right? It's very much more hard sci-fi.
Yeah, I'm looking at the screenshots here, like the United States on the side of the spaceship slash
yes.
Slash the city. The first couple of shots are very much hard sci-fi, like would not necessarily look out of place in a hard sci-fi anime, whereas the last screenshot you have here is a little bit more like a picture with Xenoblade, which is lovely outdoor beach. Mind you, there's a futuristic kind of race car looking thing there, but aside from that, it's beautiful outdoorsy.
Yeah, that's those are the scales. So that's like kind of one of the defining aspects of this game. And all games in the Xeno series, flirt with the idea of like mecha, right? A little bit, Xenogears, there's, mechas, are a huge part of that game. And then, depending on the other games kind of in the Xeno series, they show up in Xenosaga, and are pretty important. Xenoblade, not as much, but you still kind of have that with like the Mechon. And then in Xenoblade 3, the characters kind of have their like mecha-esque transformations that they do. But in, Xenoblade Chronicles X, the scales are like a major focus of the game. They are big in terms of the gameplay, because you have like the traditional on-foot gameplay that you would have with your party members and everything that you would have in the other Xenoblade Chronicles games. But then you also have an entirely separate combat system that is tied to piloting a scale. Which are the mechs. And the game is also, set up to incorporate the scale of the world when you're on foot, and then also like the scale and size of the world when you're on this towering mech. So you kind of have this different level, combat also changes, but then also your exploration and the way you interact with the world changes when you're piloting one of the scales as well. So that's like the big thing, I think, that most differentiates this game from the other games in the series.
Something that you mentioned a minute ago, you were talking about how the game kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and because of that, there's like an extended epilogue. If I recall correctly, they did something similar in Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Zach reviewed it years ago. He said their version of it was called Future Connected, and it was basically an epilogue that took place 1 year later, and he said it was a massive disappointment. It doesn't sound like this is a massive disappointment. It sounds like this actually does fix some of the problems with the game.
Yeah, and I think it's just because the original Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles X narratively are in much different places, right? The original Xenoblade Chronicles, that's a complete story that didn't really require any kind of expansion on those characters or the setting or the world or anything. Like, you have a really satisfying conclusion there, and those characters kind of have their character arcs and that are resolved. And it's also not as much of a plot heavy game. X is much more plot heavy. Even though it does have a lot of like character driven moments in it, that's more in the side quests, and the core narrative is much more, plot focused. And so because of that, having that kind of cliffhanger ending where a lot of these plot details and mysteries aren't resolved leaves an opportunity for them to come back and add additional story content that really feels impactful and meaningful. And with the additional content, the expansion that they added to the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, it kind of just feels like tacked on, I guess, because you've already kind of seen the resolution of that story, and there weren't as many lingering questions with that game and with that world as there were for X. So I think it's just set up more to have additional narrative content added to it. And I will say that like the epilogue is limited because it's only about 10 to 20 hours of content, which is, it's trying to do like what would be a full sequel in that short amount of time. So there are, some things that feel like, exposition dumps, I would say, to a certain degree. But they are really interesting. The concepts presented are really interesting, and it does answer a lot of those unanswered questions from the original.
I'm not slamming him for this, but considering the end of Xenogears, that seems to be on brand.
Yeah, it's nowhere near, like the last disc of Xenogears in terms of exposition. Like, it's much more engaging than that. So, but, I like that, the second half of Xenogears. I can't lie. So
you don't need to lie here. No lying here.
Yeah. But, I think the epilogue also has a lot of interesting, gameplay segments, and recontextualizes the world and the game world in an interesting way. You have a new villain, and there is a new area to explore as well. So it does feel significant, and it isn't. The other thing about that expansion to Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is it kind of is like entirely separate from the original game, and that's not the case here. So it's like you just pick up immediately where you left off with your same characters and all their equipment and all that stuff, so it really feels like more fleshing out the base game than that edition did for the Definitive Edition of Xenoblade Chronicles 1.
Another big difference between Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles X is that in this game you have a silent protagonist, player created,
yes.
Rather than a defined protagonist, which I believe you mentioned gives it a slightly more MMORPG kind of feel to it.
Yeah, and that decision was made to accommodate the multiplayer features. So there is like a kind of, partially asynchronous, partially, cooperative multiplayer component to X, which is the first time that the series had multiplayer, and is still the only Xenoblade game with multiplayer. So that is why they went with that decision. But I actually think it works really well. It fits really well within the narrative context of X because your humanity is being Earth's been destroyed, humanity's crash landed on this hostile planet. And you being in the shoes of a person who's woken up and from cryo sleep or whatever and doesn't really know what's going on, that allows you to acclimate and put yourself in the shoes of humanity a lot easier because they are also trying to acclimate to this new world and don't really know what's going on. They don't even know who is attacking them and what caused the conflict with Earth and that led to the Earth being destroyed and why they had to leave and all that. So you have the same amount of knowledge as your created player character, and that allows you to kind of immerse yourself into the narrative, I think, a little better than if you were playing a predefined character. And they're really smart about the storytelling in that way. And there's also, you have Elma, who is kind of the game's main character, who is your mentor throughout the game, and she's the part of your squad, and she is kind of providing that character development narrative thrust behind a lot of what's going on in the game. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, I guess, is what I would say.
I think when reading your review, the thing that actually captured my attention the most, it sounds like an interesting game, but it also seems like side quests are the thing that really, really elevate this game above many of its contemporaries, because it seems like there's some tremendously detailed and very, very well-planned storytelling.
Yeah, so that's kind of the interesting thing about X compared to the other games in the series is that the main story is only 12 missions or so. So most of the narrative content is actually in the side quests, and there are so many side quests, and almost all of them have actual stakes and unique characters and narrative weight. And they put a ton of effort into fleshing out the side quests and having them have storylines that reinforce the kind of core themes of the game, and also just being really engaging and interesting to play through. And they're somewhat limited in presentation because there's just so many side quests, but many of the side quests go to unique areas in the game. They have their own cutscenes that are unique to those side quests. And unique characters or things that happen, or equipment tied to those quests and things like that. So they really tried to make each quest and side story feel unique and interesting. And then on top of that, you also have the affinity missions. So those are missions that you can take on after you've raised your relationship with the other characters. And those are all tied specifically around that character storyline. So the game has 20, I think it's 24 different potential party members, and all of those characters have a series of affinity missions. So, you'd think with that many potential party members, people would kind of feel one-dimensional or not fleshed out, but they put a lot of effort into giving each of those characters their own unique storyline that then ties into the main storyline of the game. And that makes them feel really unique and interesting. And even though those characters, like a lot of the characters that aren't really part of the main story, are created using the same like character creator that you can make your character with, so they maybe don't look as unique, but they're really fleshed out in terms of like the storytelling and backstories and affinity missions and all that.
One of the only, actually, I wouldn't even call it a criticism because it seems like it's a criticism of others. Definitely not you. You very much enjoyed it because I remember listening to this episode of Rhythm Encounter. The soundtrack in this game is a bit controversial.
So the soundtrack was composed by Sawano, who is famous for mostly doing anime soundtracks. Most people probably know him for doing like the like some of the soundtrack and the main theme of Attack on Titan. And he has like a really kind of eclectic, unique style. The soundtrack has a lot of vocals to the songs, which is one thing that people kind of didn't like. But I think that I really love the soundtrack. I think it's excellent. And I think that those kind of vocal tracks are unique things that you don't see in the other Xenoblade games really give this game its like own unique identity. And it's able to kind of straddle a lot of like musical genres and kind of atmospheres and aesthetics with the music that kind of fit the different portions of this like alien world. So it really does feel like you're in a completely foreign and unknown place. And because the music is so kind of weird and eclectic at times. And I mean, there's also just some really good, like epic kind of scores too that you get in there. So it kind of is able to do some of the things that the Xenoblade soundtracks are generally known for, while also doing kind of its own thing. And even some of the songs that are like more memed on, like there's like the New LA theme where there's a lot of like grunting kind of in it. But that really grows on you and kind of fits like the kind of environment, like because you're in there and you're talking to characters and you're running around, and so the kind of like rap kind of style of that fits, in a weird way. But it's not for everybody. It's definitely very divisive, but I think it's great. And I think the other Xenoblade soundtracks are really kind of similar to each other, and this game really feels unique and different in that way.
Well, it's clearly one of your favorite games of all time.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If you gave it 100 and you were like, "Nah, I have games I like more," I'd be like, "Wow."
I mean, there's a few, but this I think is one of the best games. And I think for me is probably the best open world game that I've ever played. I think it really understands what makes an open world good and interesting to explore in a way that really few games do. It doesn't feel like a checklist, which is a problem that a lot of open world games have, and they make experiencing the world and traversing it just as interesting as everything else in the game. And there's always a reward for, going somewhere or, seeing something outcropping that it looks like you can get to and getting there. And there's always something interesting there to find. It just does a really great job of like creating a sense of place and then rewarding you for like exploring and engaging with the world.
Yeah, I have to admit these games have been on my radar for a long, long time. Because I had a Wii back then. I'm going to be completely transparent. I had a very jailbroken Wii. And part of the problem back then was, and the reason why aside from the fact it's illegal, the reason why I don't jailbreak systems anymore is in those days I discovered that having all of the games means that you don't really play any of the games. Mm-hmm. It really did give me like choice paralysis in a lot of ways, and a lot of games that I wanted to play that I had downloaded, I just didn't end up doing. So technically it wasn't illegal because I never ended up playing them. So I'm sure Nintendo would see it like that. I promise you, I do not jailbreak anything nowadays. And I just kind of missed this series when it first debuted. And that's kind of sad because it really has gone down as one of the great JRPG series of all time.
Yeah, and I think X, I think I'm really glad that it's on the Switch now because I think that opens it up to a new audience of people who didn't get a chance to play it before.
Is there any reason why they wouldn't have played it before? Is there some system that it was on that was not readily available to many people that they wouldn't be able to play it?
Yeah, exactly. And this is
also
God, I'm
such a bitch.
Well, it's also, the other Xenoblade games like kind of have some technical problems on the Switch, and they don't run super well. They run at really low resolution, especially in handheld mode. And X Definitive Edition actually doesn't have any of those problems. So it
wait, sorry. Why would anyone be having problems playing a game on the Switch? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's the thing about this game is that it is this huge open world, and you're like going straight from a mech and then seamlessly getting out of the mech and like all that kind of stuff. And it has no performance problems. Runs at a stable 30 FPS. Runs better than the Wii U version, and it's like 1080p and docked, 720p in handheld, no resolution dropping, no dynamic resolution like the other games have. So it's like I think it's a more impressive game, like in terms of scope and scale, and then also like runs way better. So that aspect that is kind of a downer with the Xenoblade Chronicles games on Switch is also not an issue here. So you're getting the best version of the game, and it just feels like a joy to play because of that.
That's really, really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, let's thank you for coming on and talking about these games, both of you. I wanted to suggest a discussion question before we go today, and it kind of has a little bit to do with what we were talking about early on, which is Persona 5, the Phantom X, or more accurately, gacha games. So we got some massive news last week. Nintendo's been on a roll with directs lately. They announced that Square Enix is releasing a brand new Octopath Traveler game, Octopath Traveler 0. And it looks like Octopath Traveler. It's gorgeous. But I was looking at it and I was like, this seems kind of familiar. And then I realized it's clearly based on the mobile game Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent, which I've been wanting to play for a long time. But as soon as I saw this, I was like, hell that, deleting this. I'm going to play this. I'm going to play 0 instead. But that got me thinking about Persona 5, the Phantom X, because if you review Audra and the fact that you say there's a really good game here, but it's just the gacha mechanics are really frustrating and holding it back. So I was wondering, are there any big mobile-only, primarily gacha games that you would like to see the bones transformed into big console games without gacha mechanics or any kind of gating whatsoever?
Yeah. So I can start. There's a game that was released worldwide on mobile, but has since been shut down, which is the Yoko Taro directed Sino Alice. I don't know if either of you are familiar with this one.
I have heard of it.
Yeah. So that one I never played the mobile version, but I'm a big fan of Yoko Taro, and I really would like to experience this game. And I like that it's also not like a spinoff of one of his other games. It's like a unique, story and world and everything. And I think it was shut down in 2023, both in Japan and in the US. So, people who are just getting into like his games now, they don't really have any way to experience it. So that would be one that I would like to see kind of adapted to a console kind of format, or PC or whatever, just a more traditional game format.
I imagine that you and quite a few others actually, because to say those games are beloved, his games are beloved, is putting it mildly. Audra, how about you?
Well, if I did not include P5, the Phantom X, just because we were talking about it already, I would love if Suikoden Starleap, when it comes out, was actually more of a full-blown console release. And failing that, Trails of Cold Steel Northern War, it probably just deserves a better release that actually has like a decent translation. And
yeah, you were fairly heartbroken by that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a shame. Then also, both of your games actually are kind of heartbreakers, because everyone's like, new Suikoden, it's mobile only. For me, I had an answer, and then I discovered that it had already happened. My answer was going to be Final Fantasy Dimensions 2, which was obviously a sequel to Final Fantasy Dimensions, a retro throwback Final Fantasy game released in 2010, I think, that was based on Final Fantasy V. I love that game. It's actually a really good 2D SNES-inspired Final Fantasy game. But its sequel got released, and it was loaded with gacha mechanics. And I was like, oh, hell that, don't care. But then I read about it, and it's like the original concept of it and the storyline was inspired by an undeveloped pitch for a sequel to Chrono Trigger, Chrono Break, and big time travel game and gorgeous graphics. And then they released it. It's a full version out now. It's available on like all of the app stores. And I'm like, oh my God, I probably should play this. But since that already has happened, I can't choose that one. So I'm going to pick Bravely Default Brilliant Lights, which again I believe it's shut down now. But it was, as far as I can tell from what little it was never localized into English. So I mean, we didn't even come close to getting this. It was kind of a full-scale Bravely Default game, and I love myself some Bravely Default. So I would have loved to have seen this game released in English and released without all of the gacha mechanics. But then again, who knows if it'd be good? Because the problem is a lot of these games are developed with gacha mechanics in mind, and you think, okay, just removing them, that'll fix all the problems. But it doesn't, because a lot of the pacing, a lot of the gameplay, a lot of the feel of the game is based around those mechanics, and removing them kind of creates a game that feels like a gacha game but isn't, because it's not there, and it can create a weird cognitive dissonance between the experience you're having and the experience that was originally intended. That being said, I would really like to see Bravely Default Brilliant Lights developed into a Bravely Default game. They're doing it with Octopath Traveler. There's no reason they can't do it with Bravely Default 2. So let's move on now, and we're just going to wrap this up, and I'm going to talk to you about a way you can support us here at RPGFan, and that is our store. You can find it at www.rpgfan.com/shop. There are lots of things in there, t-shirts, mugs, and you can also find, if you click on that link, another one will come up, and it will be a collaboration with Hyperplay RPG. It's the RPGFan review card collection, and that is a showcase of nearly 300 of our review cards, as you can see on Instagram and our other social media channels. I love this book. I keep saying that every single week. I'm not actually kidding. I love this book. It's such a neat little tome full of amazing and some not so amazing RPGs. So check that out. You can also check out our past episodes of Random Encounter. Last week we chatted about the recent remaster of the beloved CRPG Neverwinter Nights 2. We also talked about a spinoff of the Somnium Files, No Sleep for Kaname Date. I believe that's how you say it. And also there was a extensive conversation about a horse racing girl game, which haunts my nightmares. We also have Retro Encounter, and over there they've been chatting about the SNES RPG Breath of Fire 2. Now there are 2 episodes out, so if you're wondering what they made of this classic, does it hold up? Is the localization as bad as everyone says? Check that out. And finally, we have Rhythm Encounter, which is RPG Fan's music podcast. Last week was focused on some of the best game music of Q2 2025. Because there have been a lot of tracks released this year that are just shockingly, stunningly good. I think that this is a golden age of game music in a lot of ways. And I really think that you should give this episode a listen. There's some really cool songs in there. And you might find some music you like, and you might also go, oh, this music is awesome. I want to play these games. So yeah, do that. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random, you can fire us off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. If you have any ideas for future episode themes, suggestions for our discussion questions, anything like that, I would love to hear from you. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do so directly at jlogan@rpgfan.com. And you can also find me at Blue Sky at johnologan.bsky.social. Audra, where can we find you online?
You can find me on email at audrab@rpgfan.com.
And Ben?
Yeah, you can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
Love that name. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. Help us get the word out there. And you can also rate us on iTunes or your other podcast player of choice. Audra, Ben, thank you so much for joining me tonight and talking about these games. Really appreciate it. We're recording on a Thursday tonight. We usually record on the weekends, but we managed to get it a little earlier. So thankfully, I did not steal one of your weekend evenings. But thank you all the same for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
It's fun.
Yes, and I hope I didn't sound too bouncy and reverby in my new office. I like this new office. It's like 0.2% larger than my old one. I feel the space. Anyway, thank you everyone out there for joining us, and everyone listening, whatever you're playing, have fun.